Galwr. I call the members to order, and the first item on the agenda this afternoon is questions to the First Minister, and I have received notification under Standing Order 12.58 that the Leader of the House, Julie James, will answer questions on behalf of the First Minister this afternoon. First question, Hefin David.
Is the Welsh Government taking to support and encourage flexible working in Wales?
The Welsh Government is promoting fair employment practices, including flexible working, through the economic contract, the employability plan and the code of practice on ethical employment in supply chains. We have also set up the Fair Work Commission to advise us on what more we can do.
That's very good to hear. Policy at all levels in the UK has been about family-friendly working. It's good to hear that the Welsh Government is just trying to move beyond that. I took part in a debate week before last based on this report from the Equalities and Local Government Committee, Work It Out, Parenting and Employment in Wales. And one of the key things that's in that report in chapter 3 is that we should make workplaces more equal and more flexible. Wherever possible, I think we should be buying people's talent and not their time. And with that in mind, what further key steps and what further detail can the Welsh Government provide in how they're going to achieve that?
Yes, well, a core element of the concept of a fair work nation is, of course, the fair employment practices that have been David outlining there. And it is a central focus of the Fair Work Commission, which will be considering whether current measures available to Welsh Government can be taken further and to identify new or additional steps might be taken, and including any legislation that might be appropriate. It is worth pointing out that the Welsh Government currently has a shared parental leave scheme, for example, and it's worth saying that very loudly, Thowers, so that more people will take advantage of it, because there is a real issue of gender inequality in the decisions that people make about their careers around the time of children and so on. But we do a range of other things to promote innovative and modern working practices, which is more than flexible working conditions. And they are around looking to see where we can establish output-related working practices that don't disadvantage people, for example, with any disabilities or who need to have very flexible arrangements because their talent, as the member has said, is what you're paying for and not necessarily the time taken to travel to a particular place and so on. Business Wales website provides information to employers on how to improve productivity through flexible working arrangements, and the economic contract, as set out in our economic action plan, presents a clear opportunity to engage in dialogue with employers on a range of issues that have the potential to support individuals as well as businesses in accessing the wide range of skills available once you come away from a very standard working environment.
Russell George.
Joel Flower. Leader of the House, I was speaking to some constituents from Newtown this lunchtime who own a small business in Newtown and talking about being able to offer flexible working hours. Can you outline how the Welsh Government is supporting small businesses in particular to see the benefits of flexible working? And also, do you understand that there can be obstacles to flexible working? I see the benefits, but there are obstacles for small businesses in particular if they're employing only 3 people opposed to 300. And how can you help small businesses in particular in that regard?
Yes, Business Wales is very well placed to assist SMEs with those kinds of conversations to see how they can optimise their business practices, to understand whether they have, for example, modern HR procedures and practices in place, and in some cases there is direct financial support for businesses depending on what their growth plans are and so on. So it's well worth advising any such SME that they should get in touch with Business Wales and see what range of packages is on offer, including a rethink perhaps of exactly the way the business is structured and what might what opportunities might be evoked by a slightly different working pattern. I give the member an anecdote, which is this. I had a factory, not in my own constituency, but somewhere in Swansea, approached me. We said a skills shortage from our skills minister. And actually it turned out that they had a working pattern which had a shift that started before the local bus service arrived. And something very small like that can make an enormous difference to the range of skills and talents open to people. So having that kind of open mind. But Business Wales is well placed to give that kind of advice to businesses.
Question 2, Helen Mary.
Question 2, Helen Mary John.
What recent discussions has the Welsh Government had regarding the integration of health and social care in the West?
Welsh ministers are having regular discussions in West Wales about delivering our ambitious integration agenda for a seamless health and social care, as set out in A Healthier Wales, including how this can be supported by our £100 million transformation fund.
Thank you, Leader of the House. I'm sure that you will be aware that this is an agenda that we've been talking about here in Wales for 18 years, to my sure and certain knowledge, and probably long before devolution. And I'm sure that you will understand that communities are beginning to lose patience with the speed of change. You may be aware that on the 13th of June this year, Carmarthenshire County Council passed a motion requesting the Welsh Government to urgently look at the lack of integration between their social care policies, their social care activities, and the Hywel Dda Health Board. There is real concern, I think I'm sure you'll acknowledge, in the West about the capacity of that health board to deliver on this ambitious agenda. You know, we have the announcement of a further £180 million today to deliver seamless health and social care. Of course, we're going to welcome that. I'm unclear whether it's new money, but put against the £8 billion of the total health budget, it does really slightly look perhaps we're putting a bit of a sticking plaster on a hemorrhage. What reassurances, Leader of the House, can you give that the Welsh Government will focus on this area of work and that communities in the West can see an accelerated pace of change towards that seamless service, which we have all been talking about as the right way to proceed for many years now?
Yes, and members' right to highlight the benefits of working together in that way. Healthier Wales identifies the regional partnership boards as key drivers of change in this regard, and obviously the Social Services and Wellbeing Act provides for the boards to bring together health, social services, the third sector and other partners to deliver effective, integrated and collaborative care services. I know West Wales are in the process of finalising a proposal, and last month the Minister for Children, Older People and Social Care attended a meeting of the West Wales Regional Board to hear firsthand the progress that partners in Ceredigion, Pembrokeshire, Carmarthenshire and Hywel Dda have made to strengthen all of their integrated arrangements. And the member's right to say that we have allocated additional monies in this year to strengthen our determination to ensure that social care remains a key plank in our health service delivery.
Angela Burns. Thank you, Presiding Officer. Of course, a vital component, which you touched on very slightly in your answer to this Leader of the House, is the role of the third sector. Extremely important in terms of ensuring that a lot of our services get delivered on the ground. However, the third sector are finding it more and more difficult to engage with health and social care, harder to engage with councils, harder to engage with health boards. This is partly because a lot of the third sector organisations are becoming far more policy orientated rather than the doing of the job. What are you doing to ensure that we have a proper engagement with the third sector, that they're not left out of this integration discussion, and that we engage with the ones who actually can deliver a service and not just the ones who spend a lot of their time and their resources on lobbying us with policy ideas?
Yes, well, I very much agree with the member that the third sector is very much part of this integrated plan. Social care is, of course, a key national priority for this government, and we absolutely acknowledge that third sector partners need to be facilitated in order to have those discussions. That's very much part of the conversation that I just outlined, that, for example, the Minister for Children, Older People and Social Care is having with a range of partners around Wales with a view to facilitating exactly what the member has set out.
Questions now from the party leaders. Leader of the Opposition, Paul Davies.
Leader of the House, do you agree with me and the Environment Minister that the current local government settlement is fundamentally unfair?
No, I don't. I don't at all agree with that. There are complex issues around how the settlement works out, and it's all been absolutely agreed through the funding formula with local authority partners. And as my colleague Minister, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, said very recently, it was done in consultation with the sector groups and the WLGA. It was an agreed formula, and it has been distributed in that regard, as you would expect.
The House, the Environment Minister is absolutely right. This local government settlement is unfair and imbalanced. The local government finance settlement reveals that all 6 of the North Wales authorities will receive a year-on-year reduction in their funding. And in comparison, 7 of the 12 South Wales authorities will receive an increase in or continuation of the level of funding from last year. So firstly, it's apparent that we have a north-south divide. And to add to that, yesterday, the First Minister...
We do need to hear the Leader of the Opposition. Allow him to ask his question, please. Allow him to ask his question.
Diolch, Llywydd. To add to that, yesterday the First Minister planned to hold a Labour-only exclusive meeting with council leaders who were also urging the Welsh Government to rethink the budget settlement, despite the fact that these were the very councils that had the better side of the deal because of Welsh Government cronyism. Six of the seven authorities that maintained or increased their funding in this funding settlement were Labour-run councils. You couldn't make this stuff up, Leader of the House. Do you not agree with your Labour colleagues that the settlement is fundamentally flawed and that the funding formula needs to be reviewed because it's North Wales councils and rural authorities that will bear the brunt of these Labour-inflicted cuts?
Well, the Leader of the Opposition says that you couldn't make this stuff up and then proceeds to do so. I can only reiterate what I said in answer to his first part of the question. The funding formula is agreed every year with local government. The Cabinet Secretary for Finance sat in the finance subgroup. The local authority leaders agreed on the latest set of changes to the formula. By and large, those changes were ones that favoured more rural parts of Wales because they added an additional increment to the recognition of sparsity in the way that the formula operates. Welsh Government does not set the formula. It is set on expert advice and it is agreed by local government. There are a number of factors which impact on whether local authorities have found a decrease in funding this year. For example, there are fewer people unemployed in the local authority than this time last year, or fewer secondary school pupils in an authority than this time last year, or fewer children claiming free school meals in its primary schools. There is absolutely nothing tribal or cronyistic about any one of these factors. The member is extremely mischievous in saying so. They are all empirical measures. They feed their way into the formula, and every year some local authorities see a benefit, and some local authorities find that they see less benefit. But the member is also disingenuous in being part of the Conservative Party, who has just put the longest form of austerity in Britain that any government has ever done, ever, and he must take some of the blame, at least, for the lack of funding available to Wales during this settlement.
Well, I'm not going to take any lessons in spending from the Leader of the House and her party, which nearly bankrupted this country in 2010. Now, Leader of the House...
I can't hear what the Leader of the Opposition is now saying. So can you please carry on? And can members of the Cabinet in particular refrain from commenting throughout these questions?
Leader of the House, the Environment Minister is not the only one to contribute to the red-on-red fire. The Minister for Welsh Language and Lifelong Learning recently said, and I quote, "We must put our hands up and admit that one area where we have failed to make the impact we should have is the economy," unquote. Well, I couldn't have said it better myself, Minister. The Welsh Government has failed our economy, and local government is one of its key pillars. It employs over 10% of the Welsh workforce, spends £3.5 billion on goods and services, and promotes economic growth in all regions of the nation. Yet successive Welsh Labour settlements consistently hammer the parts of Wales that are often most reliant on the local authority economy. The Welsh Government's consistent neglect of large swathes of Wales has ultimately resulted in regional inequality and a stagnant Welsh economy. Leader of the House, will you now listen to your own colleagues and call on the First Minister to rethink this local government funding settlement so that we have one that is capable of driving forward the prosperity of our nation instead of one that will only entrench regional inequality and council favouritism here in Wales?
I think that the Leader of the Opposition is entirely wrong in both his premise and his argument. He fails to take any responsibility for having voted a Conservative government with austerity policies onto the nation. I presume he voted Conservative in the last election and therefore contributed to that. Even if he's now, I don't know what you're saying from a seated position. If you want to intervene, do say so. But I would say this, that you have delivered far worse on the Conservative benches for Wales than other colleague Conservatives have done for their region. So to talk about regional disparity funding from that vantage point is not a good look. I can also say that I'm very pleased to see that he's following the hustings and arguments inside the Labour Party so closely. Perhaps he can learn a lot from them.
Arweinydd grŵp UKIP.
Leader of the UKIP Group, Gareth Bennett.
Diolch, Lewis. Leader of the House, I wanted to ask you some questions today relating to the HS2 project. Of course, it isn't a devolved scheme, as we know, but it does have profound consequences for Wales in terms of spending and budgets. We know that the Barnett consequential is supposed to apply where we have major capital projects undertaken by the Westminster Government which do not directly benefit the taxpayer in Wales. What discussions has your government had with the UK Government over the issue of an HS2 Barnett consequential for Wales?
Yes, we've had a lot of conversation about the parlour situation with the Barnettisation of the HS2 spending. There's extensive correspondence to that effect. There clearly ought to be such a consequential, and Llywelyn, I put it on record that the Welsh Government thinks that there should be such a consequential as a result of that spending. We would like our trains to be built here in Wales. We would like the money to facilitate that and the money to facilitate the services that might link to HS2 across North Wales, for example. But he's absolutely right. We think a consequential should flow from it.
Yes, thank you for that answer, and I'm glad you appreciate the point. Now, flowing from that, it wasn't condescending in any way, Leader of the House. You don't need to respond to comments made from sedentary positions, especially Joyce Watson. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Leader of the House. I'll continue with the question. I hope you appreciate there was no condescension implied. Now, glad you agreed with me on that point. Now, my researchers have done the calculations to get the Barnett consequential based on the Treasury rules, and we've come up with a figure of around £4.6 billion, which was what Wales should have got. So clearly there doesn't seem to be any sign of anything like that coming to Wales. So could I just ask for a little bit more clarity, given your first answer? Are you now going back to the UK Government to get a more realistic deal from the UK Treasury regarding this matter?
Yes, we're in constant dialogue with the UK Treasury about this matter and about the franchise in general and about our ability to build the new kit in Wales and to stimulate the economy in so doing.
I suppose, Leader of the House, there is an alternative rather than... I mean, this is an alternative way of looking at this, in that your Economy Minister, Ken Skates, although he has cited possible benefits of HS2 to North and Mid Wales, although fairly small in financial terms, he has also made the point that the HS2 project could have an adverse impact on the economy of South Wales, because by making journeys quicker from London to the English Midlands and the North, you are, relatively speaking, making South Wales further from London, so that could impact adversely on the economy of South Wales. So it's not therefore clear whether there is any net benefits to the HS2 project from Wales. I would point out that UKIP's policy is that the HS2 project it's spiralling out of control in terms of costs and it should be scrapped. Is there now a case that the Welsh Government could think about lobbying Westminster to try and achieve that end?
Yes, well, the rail strategy of the current UK Government is not one with which we are at one, I think it's fair to say. And since he has taken the opportunity to mention the economy of South Wales in relation to trains, the best thing that the UK Government could do is both give us the consequential for HS2 and electrify the train line all the way to Swansea.
Leader of the Plaid Cymru Group, Leader of Plaid Cymru, rather, Adam Price.
Leader of the House, on 16th October, you told us there would be a debate on the decision on the M4 relief road during the week beginning the 4th of December. Does the government plan to announce its decision before that date while the Assembly is in session and not during the recess next week, for example? And will that be through the means of an oral statement to the Assembly? Will that be the First Minister's decision alone, or will there be discussion in Cabinet, and will it therefore be subject to Cabinet collective responsibility? And since we've been waiting for a decision for at least 2 decades, would a delay of a few weeks matter a great deal? Would you agree that since it's a 20th century answer to a 21st century problem, it would be wise and proper to leave it to the incoming First Minister, who will take over just a week after the proposed date for the debate on the decision?
Well, we're in the process that results from the public inquiry, so For the benefit of the Assembly, the officials have now received the copy of the Public Inquiry Inspector's report, which they are preparing advice on. Once the Cabinet Secretary for Economy and Transport has received that advice and considered the report, he will issue a written statement on the next steps. We've committed to the debate, as the member rightly says, and a vote in government time on this project, once all members have had the opportunity to consider the Inspector's report and the decision on the statutory orders. This debate and vote will be taken into account in final investment decisions on whether to award the construction contracts. And following the inquiry, should the decision be made to proceed to construction, works might commence next year. But members right, we have to go through the budget process for that to happen as well. We've already published the environmental information, draft orders and the associated reporting for the proposed M4 project.
I appreciate for the reasons of accuracy, possibly, the Leader of the House was drawing on her notes there. But could I just press her, because I'm not clear in her response that she covered, for example, whether this will be ultimately a decision for the First Minister alone, or will there be a Cabinet discussion, and is it therefore, will the Cabinet be bound by the collective responsibility in relation to that? And also, in terms of the vote, can you reassure us, I mean, to use Brexit terminology, that it will be a meaningful vote? I mean, will the motion that is tabled be amendable to allow consideration of other options, whether it's the blue route, for example, or indeed actually an entirely different approach involving investment in public transport? And will the government, the language that you used was typically ministerial, and I mean no disrespect there, I mean in terms of yes minister, I wasn't quite clear. Taking cognizance of a vote is one thing, but will this be a binding vote on the government? And similarly, in relation to the second vote, the budgetary vote as well, if that vote is lost, presumably the government then will have to listen to the voice of the Assembly expressed in relation to this project.
Yes, I mean, to be as clear as it's humanly possible to be, I've said the debate and vote will be taken into account in final investment decisions, and that it will be in government time. So it's a binding vote in government time on the government. So we've structured in that way. My own backbenchers have been very clear that they want a vote of that sort, and we promised that vote. I promised that vote, as the member rightly says, in the Assembly, and so we will do that. But we are in a statutory process, and the vote must come at the right point in that statutory process. Which is currently timetabled for the 4th of December, the week commencing the 4th of December.
Sorry, finally, can you finally explain why, reading the runes of where the government is in all this, and I accept that in terms of the statutory process, the due diligence is being gone through, but you seem poised to ignore the judgment of the Future Generations Commissioner who says that the government has vastly exaggerated the economic benefits of the relief road, and that's been echoed most recently by your own backbenchers. I mean, she agrees with us that, you know, investing the 1.4 billion that is there currently for the black route in other options, I mean, you've just would be vastly more beneficial. You could double the amount of investment in the South Wales Metro and have money left over to invest in reinstating the railway line between Aberystwyth and Carmarthen based on your own recently published feasibility study. I mean, what's the point of being the first legislature in the world to create a Future Generations Commissioner if we ignore her advice on the largest capital decision the government's ever made? Doesn't that actually then leave the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act as a fairly empty exercise?
Well, no, it doesn't. I disagree with him there. The Commissioner provided evidence to the public inquiry. We have the report. It's with officials to prepare advice. Once the relevant ministers and the Cabinet have the report, I'll be able to answer some of his questions. But I have not yet seen the report. I do not know what it says. And we're in a process in which that report, which was done at some length and took extensive evidence, will provide us with its outcome. And I do not know what that outcome is. I'm not in a position to answer those questions. And as soon as we are in that position, as I said, the Cabinet Secretary will issue a written statement on the next steps in the light of that advice. But I don't have that advice yet, so I'm not in a position to say anything more about it. The Commissioner, Adam Price, makes a very good and valid point about the role of the Commissioner, but she provided evidence to that public inquiry, which has no doubt taken it into account in providing its inquiry report outcome.
Question 3.
Question 3, David Milner.
Welsh Government doing to protect and promote the rights of people with disabilities in South Wales Central?
The Welsh Government published its new framework, Action on Disability, the Right to Independent Living, for consultation yesterday, the 22nd of October. The accompanying action plan sets out priority actions underway across Welsh Government to tackle key barriers identified by disabled people themselves, including transport, employment, housing and accessibility.
I'm grateful for that answer. You may know, as part of Mountain Ash's regeneration, a Mountain Ash community hub is being developed, and people with disabilities have contacted me to say it's essential that that hub has disabled parking facilities. Now, the day centre building never had those, nor a dropping off point. I do commend RCT Council for their consultation exercise. I have written to the lead Cabinet member, Councillor Rhys-Lewis, who's given me a very helpful answer that final plans are yet to be developed, but consideration of disabled parking as near as possible to the community hub has been highlighted as a priority consideration. So when we ask disabled people for their views, we should act on them. And there are many excellent regeneration schemes going ahead at the moment, but this sort of consideration ought to be at the heart of them.
Yes, I entirely agree with the member. It very much should be part of the consideration, and the framework sets out, one of the things the framework sets out, amongst many others identified to us by the disabled people themselves, is the need for physical access to be facilitated. I mean, there are many other forms of access, so I entirely agree with the member. I hope that RCT Council will take that into account. The voice of disabled people is rightly front and centre of this new action plan, and it highlights such issues as a matter of paramount importance.
Leanne Wood.
The leader of the campaign to save the Welsh Living grant is a Labour Party member who has succeeded in getting a motion to the Labour Party conference in support of that grant's retention. Nevertheless, your government is determined to push ahead with scrapping this grant, which is a lifeline to its recipients, in favour of transferring the fund directly to local authorities. Meanwhile, the Scottish Government, under the SNP, is retaining its version of the Independent Living grant. In the words of the recent petition on the matter, I'd like to ask you, why are people in receipt of the Welsh Independent Living grant being treated like guinea pigs when their high care and support needs require long-term stability and structure?
Well, I disagree entirely with the member's take on this. Following the UK Government's closure of the Independent Living Fund back in 2015, we put in place the Welsh Independent Living Grant with local authorities to enable them to continue payments at the same level to people who used to receive the payments as an interim measure, whilst consideration was given to what the longer-term arrangement to support those people ought to be. This is only ever a short-term measure, and the grant has since ceased to be being replaced by alternative arrangements. On the advice of our stakeholder group, we're introducing future support through local authority social services over a 2-year transition period. This commenced from April last year and is to allow sufficient time for authorities to agree with people affected the wellbeing outcomes they wish to achieve, the future support they're required to deliver, and to provide that support. So our approach aims to ensure that all disabled people in Wales, whether they receive payments from the ILF or not, receive the support they're required to live independently in the community, and we are keeping a close look on the progress in implementing these changes as they go forward.
Neil McAvoy.
What does the Welsh Government intend to do to address the communication failures between GP surgeries and the Welsh Interpreting and Translation Service? This failure of communication has meant that the deaf community is unable to access vital healthcare due to administrative problems within the NHS in Wales. It's a very serious problem.
I'm afraid I don't know. I'm not familiar with the issue that the member raises. Perhaps he would be good enough to write to me with the details and we'll ensure a response.
Question 4,
Question 4, Mohammed Ashkar.
Officer, what measure will the Welsh Government introduce to improve lung cancer outcomes in the next 12 months?
Yes, health boards and trusts are working to improve lung cancer outcomes in a number of ways, including the development of a value-based pathway of care. This will make the best use of the resources that are available, tackle variation in care, and deliver the outcomes that matter to people.
Thank you very much for the reply, Mr. But lung cancer is the third most common cancer in Wales, but it is responsible for the majority of cancer-related deaths. Like all cancers, it can be effectively treated or survival can be improved if diagnosed early. However, only 16% of patients in Wales are diagnosed as stage 1. NHS England recently rolled out one-stop shop designed to catch cancer early and speed up diagnosis. The centres act as point of referral for people with vague, non-specific symptoms that their GP or healthcare professional suspect may be cancer. These centres have proved effective in identifying potential lung cancer patients before symptoms appear and before the cancer had advanced or set in the body. Will the Minister agree to consider this introducing such a one-stop shop here so that the Wales can no longer have the poorest survival rates of all United Kingdom nations?
We have a number of things that we focus on lung cancer outcomes, including implementing a lung cancer pathway through the lens of value-based healthcare. Our one-year survival from lung cancer has improved 5.8 percentage points and a 5-year survival by 4 percentage points between 2005 to 9 and 2010 to 14. The Cancer Patient Experience Survey showed that 93% of lung cancer patients reported a positive experience of their care, a significant improvement where compared against the previous survey. We do have a national leadership group of expert clinicians, the Wales Thoracic Oncology Group, who works within the Cancer Network to coordinate activity in Wales. The group has overseen a national lung cancer initiative over the past 3 years that included a symptom awareness campaign, a programme to get people ready for surgery and to improve access to that surgery. And we've also improved access to stereotactic ablative radiotherapy by funding new equipment at Velindre Cancer Centre so that patients can access an advanced radiotherapy technique in Wales. And in addition, the new treatment fund has led to faster access to a number of new drugs, including several for lung cancer. So the member can be assured that it is a matter we are keeping under close regard.
Caroline Jones.
Llywydd. Leader of the House, the reason Wales has some of the worst lung cancer survivor rates in Europe is due in the main to delays in diagnosis. Unacceptably long waits for diagnostic tests and routine downgrading of GP referrals contribute to late diagnosis of lung cancer. So, Leader of the House, what is your government doing to cut diagnostic waiting times and ensure GP referrals are not downgraded?
We have some really interesting things happening in this field, actually. The Welsh Government, like the rest of the UK, follows the experts' advice of the UK National Screening Committee. The UK NSC does not currently recommend routine asymptomatic screening for lung cancer, but we are due to review the policy after the results of the Nelson randomised lung cancer screening trial are published. If that recommendation is for screening for lung cancer, the Welsh Screening Committee will consider how this can be appropriately implemented in Wales with a view to speeding up the screening. The National Institute for Health and Care Excellence recommends the primary investigation for suspected lung cancer is an urgent chest x-ray for people aged 40 and over with defined unexplained symptoms, and GPs are aware of this.
Question 5, Julie.
Question 5, Julie Morgan.
What plans does the Welsh Government have to improve children's rights in Wales?
We have clear plans to protect and extend children's rights. We will introduce legislation to remove the defence of reasonable punishment, and we will legislate to give 16 and 17-year-olds the vote in local government elections and support the Assembly Commission to extend voting rights to these young people for the Assembly.
I thank the Leader of the House for that response. Is the Leader of the House aware that a study published in the BMJ last week showed that countries where there is a ban on physically punishing children, including slapping and smacking, have lower rates of youth violence? The findings showed that rates of physical fighting amongst young people were 42 to 69% lower than in countries without any such bans in place. Doesn't she agree that this is very good evidence in support of the Welsh Government's plan to ban the physical punishment of children?
Yes, I'm very aware of the research, and in fact the Welsh Government funds the Welsh contribution to the Health Behaviour in School-Aged Children study, one of the data sources that the research draws upon, and we're very encouraged by the conclusion that country prohibition of corporal punishment is associated with less youth violence. It's very hard to say, less youth violence. Of course, we considered a wide range of research and reviews when developing the evidence base for our proposed legislation, and the new research is very interesting and relevant to that. But I do think it's important to also point out that our decision to take forward the legislation is also a principled one, based on a commitment to children's rights as well as on the research around violence, although that's a very nice added extra to have. The First Minister has confirmed that we will be bringing forward a bill in year 3 of the legislative programme.
Susie Davis.
Diolch yn fawr, Llywydd, Leader of the House. I've argued before, of course, that our and Welsh Government's due regard for children's rights in our policy and legislation needs to be extended to public bodies, really, in order for the effect of what we do here to be felt locally. I don't think a 3-page web consultation, as we've seen with Swansea Council recently, on a school closure, which might be suitable for 17-year-olds but actually isn't for 5-year-olds, is particularly helpful. But actually Welsh Government needs to look closer to home occasionally as well. The Children's Rights Impact Assessment on the most recent school code changes didn't mention Article 12 of the UNCRC at all. So I'm just asking, do you think it's a good idea that all careers should contain a statement of the reasons why Article 12 hasn't been observed? I mean, there may be very, very good reasons for that, just impractical or genuinely unhelpful, but I think it would be helpful if they did include a statement as to why children's voices haven't been particularly sought on an occasion. Thank you.
Yes, I'm very interested in what the member said. I'm not aware of it, so I'd be I'd welcome a conversation between myself and the Cabinet Secretary for Education and her to explore that matter, because I think what she says is a matter of some interest. Thank you.
Sian Gwenllian. Dan y mesur.
Under the Children and Young People's Rights Measure Wales, the Welsh ministers do have to give due regard to specific provisions of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child in carrying out its functions, but the legislation doesn't provide a means of operating when rights under the Convention are not adhered to. If Wales leaves the European Union, there will be many legal safeguards for the rights of children and young people which will be lost. Will your government therefore consider incorporating the rights of children under the Convention into Welsh law in full in order to ensure that there will be a means open when rights are not adhered to?
Yes, it's a very interesting point, and in conversation with Helen Mary Jones about the incorporation of the rights for disabled people, and we're very interested in looking to see what the impact of that might be in those conversations, including, if necessary, enforcement provisions and so on. And I'd very much welcome a conversation that extended that to the rights of the child. We are, of course, the only country in the UK so far to consult children and young people on their views on Brexit, and we are going to receive the consultation report by the end of October, so it'll be very interesting to see what the young people themselves say about the issue of the incorporation of rights after Brexit as well.
Jonathan Saunders.
And 6, Jonathan Saunders.
Will the Leader of the House make a statement on the importance of historical sites in Wales?
Historic sites contribute to the character of communities and deserve our support and protection. We are delighted at today's announcement that the slate landscape of North Wales will be put forward as the next UK nomination for inscription as a World Heritage Site. Wales has a unique and varied industrial heritage that is rightly celebrated.
Thank you. In 2007-8, a decade ago, the Conwy Valley Flood Alleviation Scheme was implemented at a cost to taxpayers of over £7 million. Now, despite the special circumstances of Gwydir Castle's double Grade 1 listing, Castle and Gardens, the only Grade 1 listed gardens in Wales, Gwydir found itself entirely left out of that scheme and continues to suffer increasing and very damaging flood problems. A permanent flood wall would now cost in excess of £350,000. So, the owners, in absolute desperation, have resorted to recruiting volunteers recently to sandbag the area, but have now been told by NRW to suspend this. Keith Ivans of the NRW has said that protecting this castle as a heritage site would be a matter for the Welsh Government, as it is outside of NRW's remit. Now then, Leader of the House, First Minister... Now then, the First Minister in January of last year at a Carwyn Connects event in Llanrwst said, we need to find a solution for Gwydir. This flooding cannot be allowed to continue. And continue it does. And it is devastating to think what this family have spent on bringing this castle and its grounds back. 700-year-old trees drowning because of a lack of action from this Welsh Government. Now then, could you therefore advise what steps you, as a Welsh Government, are taking? I will, obviously, again, I will challenge the First Minister on what he's done since his Carwyn
Just ask
Connect.
your question now,
Yeah.
Jonathan.
How are you going to protect this very important, historical, double Grade 1 listed castle and gardens? And how do you intend to live up to the reputation that you care and value our historical heritage?
Well, as I'm sure the member already knows, funding for flood alleviation schemes in Wales is available from the Welsh Government's Flood Risk Management Programme. It is directed to the most high-risk communities in Wales, where risk to life remains a priority. Even if it were possible to design a cost-beneficial flood scheme for Gwydir, the primary beneficiaries would still be at uninhabited cellar and gardens. And even though those features are of huge historical importance and very beloved by the local community, it does not meet the very stringent criteria for funding. Cadw's funding stream for repairs to historic buildings is focused on community assets, and therefore a flood alleviation scheme for Gwydir would not meet the criteria. But it is worth noting that Cadw has already provided grant support of over 150,000 towards restoration works to the castle in previous years. But I'm bound to say, Llawer, that this is another example of a Conservative member asking us to spend a lot of money on something which we all value, whilst not taking into account the cuts in our budget from her government over many years.
It's austerity.
Volunteers involved in preserving and promoting the blast furnaces of the former Gadlis Ironworks. The works opened in 1827 and the furnaces are described as possibly the best preserved in the UK, despite being largely unrecognised both locally and further afield. This project could be a real draw in terms of promoting the industrial heritage of the Cynon Valley and indeed Wales. How can the Welsh Government ensure that local groups access the support they need to make these ideas a success and to preserve the stories of our communities?
Yes, the member makes an extremely important point. I'm aware of the national importance of the former Gladys Ironworks site. It does indeed have the potential to illustrate and enhance our knowledge and understanding of the development of the iron industry here in Wales. Cadw officers regularly monitor the condition of scheduled monuments and provide advice and guidance to site owners, occupiers and interested parties. I understand that a Cadw officer visited the remains of the blast furnaces at Gladys in June 2018 and produced a management plan for the site. This has been copied to Rhondda and Taff County Borough Council, who own part of the site, and a range of future meetings are indeed planned with the other owners and occupiers, and appropriate advice will be provided during those meetings. I know the member has taken an active role in that. It's recognised that with the owner's permission, local groups and volunteers can and will make significant contributions to the preservation of the heritage assets at the Ironworks site. Cadw provides funding to assist the 4 Welsh archaeological trusts in supporting local groups who wish to explore, understand and promote their heritage. The Historic Environment Records, which were put on a statutory footing by the recent Historic Environment Wales Act 2016, are very valuable tools to support this work, and I commend them to anyone who hasn't had the real privilege of looking through them, because they're an excellent piece of work.
Question 7.
Question 7, Rhina Bjorwerth. Thank you, Llywydd. Will the Leader of the House make a statement on the future of the railway bridge across the A5114 in Llangefni?
Yes, if we are to improve connectivity between communities and incentivise people to travel in a more sustainable way, it is important that we investigate how we can make better use of redundant railway lines, as well as increasing services on lines already in operation.
Thank you very much for that response. On the 14th of this month, the railway bridge was demolished after a lorry struck it and made the structure unsafe. Now, there's a gap where there once was a bridge, and the fact that there is no bridge there is now a threat to any future plans to reopen the rail line, and I am convinced that reopening that rail line would be hugely beneficial to the economy of northern Anglesey, particularly the town of Amlwch. And there is a line in place already. It's not just grassland. Now, I will remind the government that you named Llangefni as one of 12 stations last year that were to be a priority to be reopened. Without a bridge, there'll be no station. So will the government commit to supporting Anglesey Council as they put pressure on Network Rail to ensure that a new bridge is put in place which would be appropriate to carry rail in future, and also to support the council in doing research on options for that route, including the possibility of widening it, the abutments and so on, so that this event can lead to an improvement rather than a missed opportunity?
Yes, the member makes a series of good points. The member is well aware that the bridge was a Network Rail asset, and therefore it's not devolved to us, and enhancing and maintaining it is not within our devolved competence. But alongside him, I welcome Anglesey Central Railway Company's intention to run the heritage railway services along the line, and recognise the importance of building a replacement bridge in Llangefni to enable them to deliver their aspirations. The Welsh Government is unfortunately not able to offer financial assistance as such, but we are very happy for officials to be engaged in any of and all of the discussions between the Isle of Anglesey County Council, Anglesey Central Railway Company and Network Well to explore all the other opportunities that the member listed in terms of funding. And it is also worth mentioning that the new station at Llangefni has made it through to stage 2 assessment in terms of its refurbishment. And if it should make it all the way to final stage, stage 3, then obviously the new station there is commensurate on the line being in existence, so that would put further pressure on Network Rail to put the line back in place. So we're very happy to support with officials' time and energy, as he suggests.
Mark Isherwood.
Clive. In 2012, Network Rail estimated the cost of reinstating the Amlwch rail line could cost more than £25 million. In consequence, in December 2014, I asked the First Minister to consider supporting reopening the stretch from Gaiwen to Llangefni as a heritage connection, and of course this bridge would be critical. I said the precedent had been established in Llangollen with the link to Corwin, not only as a heritage connection, but also as an economic and social connection for people at both ends of the lines. And the First Minister replied that it was something that the Welsh Government would be keen to investigate and work on. So what has happened since December 2014 and the First Minister's statement in reply to my question on this then?
Yes, so as I say, it's a Network Rail asset, and we have been putting some pressure on Network Rail to do something about it. And as I outlined to Rena Yorith, we're very happy for officials to work on any scheme that looks like it will bring the line back into beneficial use and do the historic investigation that he mentioned in order to see what can be done. We're also wanting to be in a position to attract funding for new stations if it becomes available, and so we've started, as I said, work on developing business cases for possible investment, and that does include the Llangefni station as one of those possibilities.
Thank you, Leader of the House. The next item, therefore, is the business statement and announcement.